really does have an advantage in being able to say that, look, his administration, Democrats broadly, they are the party that is trying to bring more people into the workforce. And if you pair that with the great jobs numbers, there's this message and narrative that I do think the administration is starting to pivot towards, which is, even if you don't give him credit for the economic numbers themselves, let's talk about how you actually make plans for your economic future. The tweak there is, let's talk about your economic aspirations. And I think that that's where, the language coming from the White House, the economic numbers, and the partnership with the union, both membership and rank and file, really does gel.
And Pete, ever since the Reagan Democrats kind of came into play for the Republican Party, there's been this sense that that Democrats have struggled maybe with this constituency, that maybe even the rank and file has a different perception than union leadership, especially in Detroit. But at the same time, Trump went to talk to union workers and basically said, and you don't need the union. So can you help us square this? Like, what is the path for Republicans if they want to pick up any votes there?
Well, there's a distinct difference between the endorsement of the union and the support of union members. I know Arlette touched on that, and it's been mentioned here, but we cannot underestimate or understate that reality. Joe Biden says he has been the most pro-union president. Sure, for the union, for the organization itself, not necessarily for union members. And that's the argument that Donald Trump, that Republicans are going to make. Joe Biden supports neutrality agreements. He wants to muzzle employers from talking to their employees during unionization talks. And he is going to do everything he can to tilt things in favor of unions. Is that something that union members want? Not necessarily. So that, I think, it's going to become a major part of this campaign, particularly in a state like Michigan, that's a battleground state.
I also want to talk about the other constituency that.
Welcome to a Wednesday edition of RBN Live. I'm your host for today. They call me CJ online, I guess you can say. In this virtual space, I'm known as CJ. In real life as Jay. Welcome to RBN Live again. We have a lot to get to today. I think I have it broken up into maybe about 7 stories that all tie or roll up to, maybe that's a better way of saying it, roll up to the broader topic that we have today, and that is Democrats are truly sick, forcing their voters to pick between abortion rights and genocide. That is truly a disgusting, forced on choice that they're giving to their constituency. And I mean, it feels good to be a post-Duopolis right now, not having to deal with these sort of do or die situations that the party that I choose to support is continuously perpetuating upon me. So, but that is the broader topic. Let me bring up some of the other topics that roll up to that. So it's kind of like the way I'm doing the show differently. I want to build up or have all of the stories sort of connect to the same broader topic. But let's bring up the graphic and let's bring up the graphic. And I think the graphic kind of covers what I've already said. Just this, vote for Biden, even though he's a genociding, enabling person. Let's just say that. Give him a little bit of respect. But then there's other topics. So we're also going to cover Van Jones. There's a video that's out that's kind of going viral. Van Jones shocks the panel that he's on. So there's the New Hampshire primary that happens. Joe Biden wins the write-in. I mean, to be Marianne Williamson and the other guy, Dean Phillips, to lose to a write-in candidate. Somebody's not running. It's just amazing. But anyway, Van Jones shocks the panel with his critique of the Biden primary, or lack thereof, and it's a pretty good video. We're also going to cover an article from the Intercept, and it's entitled "A Vote for Third Parties is a Vote for Trump." Now, those of you who are in the left spaces, how many of you have heard that before? A vote for third parties is a vote for Trump, but somehow that's coming from a so-called left media outlet known as the Intercept. So we'll cover that article too. Rising. Marianne Williamson, there was a couple of things I wanted to cover with Marianne Williamson. Keaton from Due Dissidents went out to one of her campaign events, or the New Hampshire primary, and he covered her at an event. Wanted to cover that. That's brief, but the bigger story for me in this with Marianne Williamson, she went on Democracy Now! So that interview sort of is proof of how unserious just the whole concept of social democracy, social Democrats, otherwise known as progressive Democrats, is. So we'll cover that. But we're starting out with this story with the UAW. But the other story that's tied to this is Biden interrupted. And that is Biden has his first sort of real campaign event and is interrupted. But they're prepared. They're prepared for interruptions, but it's like 10 plus interruptions during the speech. So we'll cover that. But we're starting with the main story, with the initial story that you saw with this video here. We start with CNN. I just added this in. I was going to lead with Van Jones, but I just saw this video watching CNN because the guy, and I think he's he's from the Bush administration, and he's obviously for the Trump, he's obviously in the Trump camp right now. But you hear what he said about unions, because this is something the Democratic establishment likes to tout. Even the NATO left likes to tout. Oh, Joe Biden is the union president. Joe Biden is he's the most pro-union president there is. According to who? And this guy, I forget his name, but the guy in the blue suit, the navy blue suit, I think that is. I am colorblind. I think that's navy blue. The white guy. I guess maybe that's even better. That narrows it down better. The white guy from the Bush era administration. He says, wait. Maybe the union bosses are down with Joe Biden, but I beg to differ with the rank and file union. And I do want to get to a story or an article actually to kind of illustrate that, and a couple of other receipts here. So let's get to the first one here. A couple of headlines. Let's start with this one first, kind of talking about the same thing. So Joe Biden will be meeting with the UAW. The UAW is going to be having an event. It's actually a multi-day event that they're going to be having. And this multi-day event apparently is going to have Joe Biden appear because they're going to eventually endorse him. That is the UAW. You know, the same UAW that's called for a ceasefire, that's called virtue signaling. You know, the same UAW that brought him on to speak during their contract dispute after he had broke a strike with the rail union. Isn't that a show of solidarity with UAW? So Sean Fain is a classic social democrat, an American social democrat, where you do a lot of virtue signaling. You study the radical language. You study language to people to your left, and you use that in your rhetoric, but not at all in your strategy. This is a guy who had, I think they call it the standing strike or something like that, where everybody didn't go on strike at the same time. And he tried to make it seem like that was some sort of intellectually better strategy. For who? For the owners? Anyway, I digress. Let's get into another headline. I'll read this one. If Palestinian lives matter, because that's what the UAW and Sinn Féin claim, the UAW should not endorse Biden. Let's go. Actually, let me read a little bit from that article so you can see what it says, and I'll bring it up here. It says, let me make sure this is right, because there's two. So I'll read a little bit of this one, and then the other one I might read more of the entire article. But let's read a little bit of this first one. This is from the Left Voice, and they've been getting better. I noticed they've gotten better over the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months, maybe even a year. They have pushed themselves or have gotten new people that's running it or something, and they've moved a little bit further to the left. But this is from them. Now the UAW leadership is meeting to discuss whether to finally endorse Biden's re-election campaign, and so far it is unclear whether they will. While it is obvious that the UAW should not endorse Biden's rival, former President Donald Trump, an endorsement of Biden would be a betrayal of all the rank and file members who supported the call for ceasefire. Now stop there. This speaks to the video we just saw. To the guy on CNN saying, hold up a little bit there, CNN and Democratic strategists. The way you're labeling, he's a union president, that is Joe Biden, and he's the most union president. That's what the leadership says. And understand, the leadership is not part of the working class of these unions. These leaderships are making, I don't even know, upwards of $250,000 I've heard. Now, these aren't, I'm just telling what I've heard. I'm not giving you any specific number, okay? But let me continue with with the rest of this here. Instead, I'm here now, if you're following along. Instead of endorsing bourgeoisie candidates, the UAW needs to assert its independence from both parties of capital and work to organize a real resistance to the war in Gaza. Doesn't that sound like music to your ears? Like I said, the Left Voice has gotten a lot better. I do think this is a guest submission. I don't think this is one of their regular writers that wrote this article, but I continue. The UAW leadership signed onto the Gaza ceasefire letter launched by the United Electrical Union and Local 3000. The letter calls for an end to the war for food, water, fuel, and medicine to Gaza, for Hamas to release its remaining Israeli hostages, and for all armed groups to obey the Geneva Convention and refrain from war crimes. Quote, we call on President Biden to immediately call for a ceasefire, end quote. It says, adding that the U.S. labor movement should demand a ceasefire. Now, I'm going to pause here. Now, if they proceed, after doing all of this, proceed to now endorse him, this is what the article goes on to say. This is a contradiction. Either the U.S. working class together learns about the truth of this unjust war and strives to force an end to it, or we request understanding and kindness and expect a 180-degree about-face by the war primary sponsor, the current U.S. president. So essentially, we've seen the UAW and Sinn Féin virtue signal, a classic trait of social democrats, but not really be down to go that far. But let's go to this article here. Here's another headline, and you'll kind of see in the body of this next article why I say the Left Voice have moved to the left. They're not where we are. This article is more in the classic Marxist analysis, where they give the language and an analysis of it. So You'll hear the difference in some of the language. Right here, Biden to speak at UAW Political Action Conference as union prepares to endorse warmongering president. This one written by Jerry White over at the World Socialist website. And let me just read a little bit before I bring up the full article, because I do want to read a little bit more of the full article after I read more, after clipping this. This is from that article. Let's read. U.S. Senators Bernie Sanders. Hang on a second here.
Okay. All right, so let me say that one more time here. Biden to speak at UAW Political Action Conference as union prepares to endorse warmongering president. And now let's get into some of the article here. Throughout the 4-day UAW Community Action Program, somebody's messaging. All right. Throughout the 4-day UAW Community Action Program conference, none of the keynote speakers even mentioned Biden's name, knowing full well he is widely hated for backing Israel's genocide in Gaza and other reactionary policies. Nevertheless, UAW President Sean Fain, Secretary Treasury Margaret Mock, and the other union officials took their talking points right out of the Democratic Party election playbook, arguing that the defeat of Trump was the only way to defend democracy and abortion rights and to fight for economic and social justice. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders played his assigned role in portraying the Democrats, a party spearheading a global war for imperialist domination and colluding with the Republicans to attack immigration and destroy democratic rights, as a champion of the working class against the billionaire class. Biden has cultivated the closest ties with the UAW and other unions. This is central to his administration's corporatist integration of the labor bureaucracy to impose austerity and labor discipline at home to wage war abroad. This is what the UAW is deciding to partner with this endorsement that's forthcoming. So understand, any union, any working class group, or any group that's representing the working class, representing labor, you can only truly do that if you're not connected to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And the UAW is one of those. Most of these unions are a corporate captured, specifically by the Democratic Party. 1 second here, everybody. All right, so back to a little bit more of this. After decades of rank and file opposition to the corporate UAW bureaucracy, Fain was installed as union president in 2023 in a rigged election process that excluded 90% of the membership and was upheld by Biden's Labor Department. You know, the NLRB that they keep claiming about, that the Social Democrats keep saying that is so great. They're the ones that upheld that. Social democracy. The UAW apparatus used the phony stand-up strike to wear down resistance and impose labor agreements that defend the corporations and the financial and institutional interests of the union bureaucracy. Meanwhile, we have NATO left and we have all of corporate media saying the UAW, along with Sean Fain, this is the greatest contract we've gotten ever. This is historic. From whose point of view are we using those descriptions? Is that from the workers' point of view? Or if that's from the owner's point of view? But let's continue on. During the stand-up strike, which involved less than a third of the 146,000 UAW members at the Biden 3 automakers, Biden held a photo op with Fain and on Michigan picket lines and joined the UAW president at an Illinois rally to hail the sellout contracts, which have paved the way for the destruction of hundreds of thousands of jobs as the U.S. auto companies convert to electric vehicles. So when we're talking about more broadly, the Democratic Party and what they're doing now to force a choice on their voters, their supporters, between a genocide or abortion rights, you can add this is sort of another leg that sort of that keeps that upholds the chair of this democratic sickness, how they're just truly sick. So not only are they doing what they're doing in Palestine, not only are they virtue signal about abortion rights, like they're going to actually give abortion rights, you have the media arm, the PR arm of the Democratic establishment pretending like Joe Biden is some sort of union president. And if you watch some of the segments today that I was watching, it's truly sickening how they're labeling him. How like it's like, why haven't they endorsed him? He stood side. They said Biden stood side by side and shoulder to shoulder with the union in their fight against the automakers. That's what happens when social democrats make these agreements with these terrible, corrupt people. Then they go and parade around. Look, I'm a labor this. Let's see what other receipts do we have here for. Actually, let me go to my notes here. That might be better for me to do. I'm trying to get better at staying on task with my notes. And I'll say this again because I think my sound was messed up earlier. I'll repeat a couple of things I said earlier when the sound, and you probably could hear me, but it still wasn't great, but you could hear what I was saying. But I want to say it with a more clear mic. I believe is the mic. It's turned on now. Let me make sure before I say this again. Now, being paranoid, it is. So in my notes, I have this. This is why real working class organizations must not have any attachment whatsoever, however small, to the GOP or the Democrats. Any successful working class organization must draw the line at aligning with Democrats or the Uniparty, let's just say that, but Democrats and the Republicans, or they do not truly represent the working class. And this is what Shama Sawant says all the time, which is the issue with progressive Democrats, social Democrats. In my notes, I go on to say the UAW is proving itself to be social Democrats, virtue signaling, studying radical language. And you saw that with Marianne Williamson, the interview she did with Sabby and Nick, didn't know a bunch of stuff. Then a couple of interviews later, maybe 5 interviews after that, she's saying stuff she heard on RBN. So they you know, the professional managerial class, which largely makes up this group, these are people who went to college. They got degrees. They know how to study. They study and then they learn and then they regurgitate with none of the backing behind it, with none of the substance behind it. But now let me now go to the next part in this presentation on how the Democrats are truly sick. You have, I don't know how many legs we have to this table. Let's call it a table. I said chair earlier. Let's call it a table. But if the table is the Democrats being truly disgusting, what makes up this table? What are the legs that's holding up this table? We just talked about labor, how they're pretending to be for labor as they break a strike. That's one leg. And then you got how they're double-crossing Palestinians. That's another leg. We'll talk about the legs as they go. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But let's now go to this other thing that kind of went viral today. And oops, let's go back some more. And that is this video with Van Jones on CNN. And this is Van Jones discussing how wrong it is for a party not to allow a primary while there is a large amount of discontent for the incumbent. So you never heard such things expressed on corporate media like this. And shout out to Case Study QB. This is one of his clips. And this was something from last night, as you can see the ticker below during their coverage of the Dem primary. And I have noticed during some of these, when they're covering these primaries, is when you get some of their most honest critiques about other things. Like if they happen to talk about something else because it's not prepared. They're prepared to talk about the election, about the New Hampshire primary. They're not prepared to rehearse, and some things slip out. And this is, to me, this is one of those things that slip out. And another thing, this is what Van Jones do. He goes on and cries about the election of Genocide Joe, Jim Crow Joe, back in 2020. I covered that, I think, last week. He does silly, ridiculous stuff like that, kissing up to the establishment. And then he does stuff like this, where he says stuff like what he, let me just play it before I give a bunch of adjectives to it. But this is Van Jones shocks this panel. And then you'll see one of the girl that chimes in, I believe she's a redhead, understand she used to work, I think, in the Obama administration. She's like, hold on. Let me make sure I insert this. Listen to what she says, but this is Van Jones, CNN.
Yeah, but it's so embarrassing and weird that we can't just have a normal primary. I love South Carolina. I'm glad that South Carolina is going first, but there's something wrong in a party where you have this much discontent with the candidate and nobody can figure out a way to vote or do anything that counts or send a signal or send up a smoke signal, get a carrier pigeon, do something and listen to the fact that people in this party are very worried that Biden's not the right person. And so, and by the way, he can't give a speech now because his kids are so upset. In 1968, there was an unpopular war with very scary images, and it mobilized a generation and it hurt Democrats in 68.
Well, that was the example that Dean Phillips chose to.
Exactly.
He thought he could be Eugene McCarthy.
In that, yeah.
I mean, there was an opportunity for a candidate other than Joe Biden to make moves here, and for voters in New Hampshire to say we want to see somebody different than Joe Biden. And Joe Biden won in a write-in by 3 to 1.
But do you feel good about it? Hold on. Did you feel good about the fact that these people who did go for Dean, there's stuff that doesn't count anyway? There's no way for anybody in this party to register an effective, even protest vote because the DNC ziplocked this thing before anybody had a chance.
You don't think if there had been an unexpected level of support for Dean Phillips in this process today, that there would have been more of a reckoning? There was absolutely the opportunity for people to make their voice heard, but people want to see Joe Biden be the nominee. Joe
I'm
Biden
unclear,
beat Donald
Van.
Trump
What are you
in
saying
2020.
in terms of people not like what part of it makes you feel they were cut off from the process?
Well, the fact that, first of all, I think Dean Phillips begged everybody to run, begged Gavin to run, Gretchen to run. The people who were basically managing themselves for 2028 didn't want to run, so he had to kind of kamikaze himself. But the way that the DNC is operating, it's sending the signal that this is Joe Biden's party, perfectly fine, and that no dissent is welcome. And that's the message that's being received.
I think here's what I think.
The president, though. I mean, he is the head of the party. It is Joe Biden's party.
Right.
I mean, he's the head of the party.
Well,
now,
tell
you may not want to see him as the nominee, but
tell that
a lot of Democrats.
Tell that to
do.
all these young voters.
A lot of Democrats.
Here's
do.
It was hard for me. I'm doing that new. I'm trying to let the entire clip play, and then I'll rewatch it and give my commentary. That was hard to do during that, but you see what I meant. Yeah, she is redhead. I don't know if it's natural, but she's redhead. So Harry Epson chimes in, hold on, and pretends. So let's. It's a lot to break down here.
Yeah, but it's so embarrassing and weird that we can't just have a normal primary. Look, I love South Carolina. I'm glad that South Carolina is going first, but there's something wrong in a party where you have this much discontent with the candidate and nobody can figure out a way to vote or do anything that counts or send a signal or send up a smoke signal, get a carrier pigeon, do something and listen.
That part to me, now he says it softly there. But then after somebody says one thing and then he goes on and says it a little more forcefully, let's listen.
Listen to the fact that people in this party are very worried that Biden's not the right person. And so, and by the way, he can't give a speech now because his kids are so upset.
We're going to be covering that. Biden interrupted at one of his first major campaign stop where it's a lot of people and he's giving a speech. They got him hopped up on something to make him seem normal. Interrupted upwards of 10 times. We'll get to the details when we get to that segment, but interrupted upwards of 10 times. I want to say, I know they said at least 10. I've heard another a new segment say 15 times. I think it was Morning Show. No, Way Too Early on MSNBC. It said it was like 15 times. The reporter who said she sat in there and she said he got interrupted like 15 times. And she said, maybe I'll bring up that Way Too Early segment. And she said that it was very uncomfortable. It kept happening. It was very uncomfortable in the room because it kept happening. But let's continue.
In 1968, there was an unpopular.
Actually, I did want to rewind it and let him finish this thought here.
Person, and so, and by the way, he can't give a speech now because his kids are so upset. In 1968, there was an unpopular war with very scary images, and it mobilized a generation and it hurt Democrats in '68.
Well, that was the example that Dean Phillips chose to.
Exactly.
He thought he could be Eugene McCarthy.
In that, yeah.
I mean, there was an opportunity for a candidate.
This person here, she is a Democratic operative, understand? So when these people leave these administrations, they never really stop advocating for them. This is the reason why they put them in media. So that's why she's there. I mean, literally all of these people was on somebody's campaign at a time. And you got Anderson, CIA Cooper in the middle. The rest of these people were on somebody's campaign at some point. Let's listen to this made up story she says right here.
He could be Eugene McCarthy.
In that, yeah.
I mean, there was an opportunity for a candidate other than Joe Biden to make moves here, and for voters in New Hampshire to say we want to see somebody different than Joe Biden. And Joe Biden won in a write-in by 3 to 1.
So, closing or delegitimizing a primary, not allowing people to run, so they have to like RFK, so they have to go and run as an independent. That to you, Miss former Obama official, that to you is Other people were allowed. Is that how you describe it? Is that how democracy works? That's how she described there were other people, and look what happened. As if you didn't tip your finger on the scale of that race. And we're supposed to believe these people when they're supposedly analysts on TV. That's clearly a biased point of view.
But
So,
do you
I
feel
don't
good
think
about it?
there's
Like,
no-
hold on. Did you feel good about the fact that these people who did go for Dean, their stuff doesn't count anyway? There's no way for anybody in this party to register an effective, even protest vote because the DNC ziplocked this thing before anybody
But
had
you
a
don't-
chance.
So he just said what I said. Because he's like, he essentially, I said the long version. What I said, he just said, do you feel good about that though? That's saying the same thing. Like, you feel good that the Democratic Party ziplocked this shit and he won a write-in? That really is a win? That's a W for you? Okay. That's a flimsy W. That's very close to a participation award.
You don't think if there had been an unexpected level of support for Dean Phillips in this process today, that there would have been more of a reckoning? There was absolutely the.
She's saying, if somehow Dean Phillips won or got all of the support, you don't think there would have been a reckoning, meaning an uprising to bring about a primary? What does that have to do with a primary actually happening? There's been an uproar. It's hashtag force the debate. They have a hashtag. I've seen literature of it. Case Study QB used to be on talking about this all the time. Terrible.
The opportunity for people to make their voice heard, but people want to see Joe Biden be the nominee. Joe Biden be.
That is just a lie. The poll, like literally the polling says the opposite. Everybody has seen the poll where 70% of people do not, or 70% of everybody don't want to see either one of these candidates run for office. But she's saying, let me see, 70, I think it was 70%. Was it 70%? Yep. Here it goes right here. So let's bring up the receipt. And I'm going to try to do better at this too. Bringing up receipts when I talk. I guess people like that. Apparently. So I'm going to get back to the video, but I do want to just point out how this person is just bold-faced lying right here. The Hill. I just Google this real quick. Poll, 70% of voters don't want Biden to run for second term. There's multiple polls of this. This has been referred to in media all this time, but she right now is pretending like that is not the case. Let's now bring that down. Let's bring it back up the video here. So, which video was? Oh yeah, the Van Jones video. So let's bring back up the Van Jones video and finish this first part. There's a second part to this.
What are you
In
saying
2020
in terms of people not like what part of it makes you feel they were cut off from the process?
Well, the fact that, first of all, I think Dean Phillips begged everybody to run, begged Gavin to run, Gretchen to run. The people who were basically managing themselves for 2028 didn't want to run, so he had to kind of kamikaze himself. But the way that the DNC is operating is sending the signal that this is Joe Biden's party, perfectly fine, and that no dissent is welcome, and that's the message that's being received.
I think here's what I think.
President, though. I mean, he is the head of the party. It is Joe Biden's party. I mean, he's the head of the party.
Well,
now,
you
may not want to see.
Now, do you detect some anger right here? This is the professional managerial classes version of when she tilts her head like that She is upset that this motherfucker's saying this shit. This is her words, not mine. That's a joke. Her words, not mine. This motherfucker, you may not want to see him, Van. So it's so funny, though, how when the DNC does something that's not popular and you go to the Biden administration, then they want to say, oh, that's not Biden. That's the DNC. They're separate. But in this case, when it's like, why isn't the DNC holding the primary? Because they're going to coordinate. Well, it's Joe Biden's. He is the head of the party. You see? When it fits them, they flip either side. So, but there's
tell that to all these young voters.
A lot of Democrats do.
Now listen to what he says as a reply. That's him saying, hold on, sister. This is them. This is how the professional managerial class fight. Now on our channel, it'll be screaming. This is their version of being civil and saying, because he's saying, tell that to them. She's saying, do you think this? And he's like, tell that to them. Like, tell it to the people who's not going to vote for you, sister. Let's get back to the video. Because I do want you to see this final part, because I want you to hear what he says at the very end, the last 2 seconds.
Fine. And that no dissent is welcome. And that's the message that's being received.
I think here's what I think.
President, though. I mean, he is the head of the party. It is Joe Biden's party.
Right.
I mean, he's the head of the party.
Well,
now,
tell
you may not want to see him as the nominee, but
tell
a lot of Democrats
tell that to all these young voters.
A lot of Democrats
Here's
Yeah, a lot of Democrats do, but the point is you guys need the young voters. She's pissed. She's supposed to be an impartial analyst. That doesn't seem very impartial to me. And Van Jones seemed like he was being impartial there. Hey, this is a critique. This is not a good look. So from his point of view, or from my point of view, it seemed like he's the one that's the impartial one in this dynamic. He's actually playing the position all of these people should be playing, which is a bystander. Let's now got another message. I'm always worried that my sound or something is off. But anyway, let's get to the second part or the second video of this. And again, shout out to K Study QB for curating all of this.
It's so embarrassing and weird that we can't just have a normal primary.
Okay, here we go. Now let's go to the second part. It's not as, or actually it's just as long. I don't think, we don't need to preface this one here. Let's listen. I'm going to play it all the way through, then I'm going to come back and
reality. Here's the reality. A lot of people have expressed concerns. I've expressed my own concerns, but I think that there's such a focus. There is affection for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party.
Always.
But there's also a great fear of Donald Trump. I think that there are a lot of people who thought about running, who quietly thought about running, and thought, I don't want to do something. He's going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party, and I don't want to damage him in that cause. And so that is the reality of what happened. As long as Joe Biden wanted to run, he was going to be the nominee of the party.
But I do always, can I just say really quickly? I mean, look, there's always, historically, there's hand-wringing, right? There's always hand-wringing around the re-election. There's always concern. I think, Axe, you could speak to concerns in 2012 about Obama's candidacy. Of course, when you're looking at a president who has had 4 years in office and, people have zeroed in on their lines of attack and, this is not an unprecedented political moment. It does not mean that Joe Biden is in some way historically vulnerable. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. But
he is historically vulnerable.
I don't think that's true.
Historically vulnerable.
Then why did Democrats overperform in 2022? Why did they overperform?
We're talking about 2024, and you and I read the same polls. You know he is historically vulnerable. That doesn't make Donald Trump a world beater, but he ain't getting any younger. and these numbers haven't been getting any better, and you can't fix it. And you might be able to fix some of it with Trump, and that's why you want Trump so bad. You say he's a threat to democracy, but you've been begging to put him on the ballot, which I still don't understand. But he is historically vulnerable for exactly the reasons Van just pointed out. You've got tons of constituencies who are mad about what's been done for them or not done for them. And you've got a bunch of people who don't think he's got the mental capacity to hold the office. It is historic vulnerability in this incumbent.
It is also
That was beautiful. That was beautiful to hear that comeback, because that was nonsense with, and I keep calling her the redhead. I need to find out her name. If anybody knows, put it in the chat. I don't mean any disrespect. I'm just going off the easiest way to describe her for you to quickly know who I'm talking about, and that's her hair color. And that's the reason why I say that. But let's replay it, and now I'm going to give my analysis of what this is. It's just beautiful, though, that part at the end by the Republican strategist.
Here's the reality. A lot of people have expressed concerns. I've expressed my own concerns, but I think that there's such a focus. There is affection for Joe Biden in the Democratic Party.
Always.
But there's also a great fear of Donald Trump. I think that there are a lot of people who thought about running, who quietly thought about running, and thought, I don't want to do something. He's going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party, and I don't want to damage him in that cause. And so that is the reality of what happened. As long as Joe Biden wanted to run, he was going to be the nominee of the party.
But there's always, can I just say really quickly? I mean, look, there's always, historically, there's hand wringing, right? There's always hand wringing around the reelection. There's always concern. I think, Axe, you could speak to.
So she's basically saying there's always people who are against the incoming person or the incumbent. There's always that. This is just a normal thing. Nobody ever gets 100%. That is her argument, that this presidency, this administration, what we're seeing in the poll numbers, this is all normal, right? That's what she's saying. That's her point. Let's continue to the final point I want to comment on.
To concerns in 2012 about Obama's candidacy. Of course, when you're looking at a president who has had 4 years in office, and people have zeroed in on their lines of attack, and this is not an unprecedented political moment. It does not mean that Joe Biden is in some way historically vulnerable. I don't think that's true. I do think that's true. But
he is historically vulnerable.
I don't think that's true.
Historically vulnerable.
Then why did Democrats overperform in 2022? Why did they?
This thing here, this is one of the things that irks me the most, or one of the things. When they keep referring to the 2022 midterms as a victory for Democrats, they lost. The Democrats lost because the punditry class, they projected. We didn't say none of that. The people didn't say that. All of them were projecting, Republicans should win by 20 seats, 30 seats. And they win by whatever it was, 5 or 6, 7 seats. Oh, that's a loss. That's not a loss. Y'all still lost the House. So this concept of painting 2022 as some sort of thing other than a win for the GOP is absurd. But they keep doing it. It's one of the things that really irks me. But let's let her make that point and let him destroy it.
Perform in 2022? Why did they overperform?
We're talking about 2024, and you and I read the same polls. You know he is historically vulnerable. That doesn't make Donald Trump a world beater, but he ain't.
He's saying, you and I read the same polls since you want to get sassy, Missy. That's how I read that comment. You read the same polls as I do. So don't pretend like he's not historically vulnerable. Point to a president who was down in 5 battleground states. Point to any president, any incumbent. Point to any incumbent who has won re-election when they've hit an approval rating under 35. How does that not make him historically vulnerable? You see how these people, you see how you can't trust anything they say. Not the people who are advocating. You can not typically. You can sometimes trust what the opponent of something is saying. Like in this case, he's saying, no. What are you saying? This nonsense. He's being more upfront because it's not about his own side. So he's willing to go further with the truth. That's a better way of saying it. The Democrats are willing to go further with the truth only about Republicans and vice versa. Republicans are only willing to go further with the truth only if it's talking about Democrats. So in this instance, he's more closely aligned with what I would say is reality. And let's let him further make the point. But true, the polling alone makes this historical.
2024, and you and I read the same polls. You know he is historically vulnerable. That doesn't make Donald Trump a world beater, but he ain't getting any younger, and these numbers haven't been getting any better. And you can't fix it. And you might be able to fix some of it with Trump, and that's why you want Trump so bad. You say he's a threat to democracy, but you've been begging to put him on the ballot, which I still don't understand. But he is historically vulnerable for exactly the reasons Van just pointed out. You've got tons of constituencies who are mad about what's been done for them or not done for them. And you've got a bunch of people who don't think he's got the mental capacity to hold the office. It is historic vulnerability in this incumbent.
It is also
historic. And just to drive home the point, because I do want to start doing this, I guess I get this from Nick. Let me show you this headline here. Biden hits record low approval rating of 33% in devastating poll. And this is an ABC Ipsos poll. ABC is the one who puts the money up. Ipsos is the one who actually conducts this. This is just in January, conducted January 4th through the 8th, that none of them covered. I've yet to see coverage of this poll on CNN. Yet to see it, because I would cover it. So that's the Van Jones appearance, and you see, hang on a second here. I'm trying to pull up my notes here. Oh, right here. So more broadly speaking, Democrats are truly sick. Here's another leg we can add to the table. Remember the table of the Democrats being truly sick? They're not actually for democracy. So you got one leg, they're committing a genocide against Palestinians. Another leg that they're strike-breaking labor advocate phonies. And then you got this one here that they're not actually truly down for democracy, and you can see that in their primaries. And let's go back to Twitter to get to our next topic. I believe that was the end of was that the end of? Yeah, that was the end of that video. So let's get to our next segment. In this, let's stick to my notes here. So now let's go into interrupting Biden, because it kind of flows well. So now we're going to cover the protests that happened at the Biden, whatever it was, the Biden speech, one of his campaign speeches, events we're going to cover. Let's put up the right banners, though, here. Where are we? Biden interrupted in November 2024. I like that name. It's a play on words, slightly a play on words. But let's cover this story here. And actually, let's play this one here. We'll play a couple versions of the same video because they catch different sounds. So we're going to play a couple of versions of the same video, but I'll start out this segment this way. And that is protests like the ones we're going to see in this segment, the protests we're covering in this segment, prove that this Palestinian issue is not just going to go away the way that all the Democratic establishment and the Biden administration is hoping. It's not just going to go away. This is something that's long lasting. Like, well, I don't want to give a specific. I don't have to give a specific example, but this is something I have written down in my notes. The Democratic establishment is taking for granted that all of you Palestinian supporters will forget all of the dead bodies of women and children, like all of those images that we're currently seeing. And I think that's why I think that's the reason why you don't hear the Biden administration really go after the Israel about journalists being dead, because dead journalists means less coverage of what's happening in Gaza, which, when it boils down to it, that's a good thing for the Biden administration. But let's cover a couple of videos for this segment, and then an article. Now, a lot of this video, the audio is just, it's loud. There's a lot of cheering, so we're trying to make out what people are saying. But let's listen to this one here. Now, if you don't think this was coordinated, if you don't think everybody knew there were going to be protests, everybody knew, and this is the strategy to combat that protest. All they need to do for combating protests for the larger national audience is audio. That's it. In the audience, this doesn't work. Like, in the audience, the people who are disrupting, they're disrupting. The disruption is still going on. But the strategy to combat the protests, and you saw it in some of even the elected officials. I can't remember if it was Hakeem Jeffries or somebody who got some protests, and it was just in the protest, the people just start chanting. Because for a video to go viral is to be able to hear the sound, to be able to hear the chants of Genocide Joe, to be able to hear the chants of I'm not going to vote for you. So this is completely coordinated, but let's listen. Then he quiets him down like the leader of a choir, just so he can now play the graceful role of saying, I understand. This is a strategy. Let's continue with another video. We're not done with this event. I'm just going to do a different angle. This is from Code Pink. It's a little bit longer video. So let's watch this entire video from beginning to end. Sound is good and bad in certain parts, but let's watch all of it.
Thank you. Well, look, Jill and I had a chance to sit down and talk with Amanda and her husband, Josh. I told you how proud we were of your courage, Amanda, standing up and speaking out on such a personal issue that helps so many women. And
this shit looks so phony. This shit is so phony. But let's examine what we see on the screen here. Let's examine it. This is what the Democratic Party, this is why I say what makes the Democratic Party truly sick. What does the banner say? Restore Roe. Restore Roe. So the party that sat around, didn't codify Roe versus Wade multiple times, even though it was promised by presidents like Barack Obama on camera. Those people right now are going to be the saviors of Roe. Are they? Or are they just using that to dangle as bait, as a carrot? You tell me that's not the mind of a sick individual to dangle something that somebody else who believes that you're really advocating for. And then you have convinced a bunch of young people to get on stage and chant 4 more years for a president who is destroying their future through climate crisis, drilling permits. That's the Democratic Party. Just disgusting to see those young people do what they're doing to protect a genocide Joe, Jim Crow Joe. Let's before I did want to show what Nick wrote here. This is Nick. Shout out to Nick. He'll be on tomorrow night. Last night it was a banger of a show. One of the videos we're gonna get to, they actually reached out to the girl who was on Face the Nation and had her on the show. Great show. Make sure you check out Nick at Night from last night. But this is what Nick says. Bro, the Chicago DNC convention is going to be wild. If shiplifts think chanting 4 more years like brainless sheep will stop what's going to happen, they are delusional. And I couldn't agree more with my RBN brother, Nick. And before I play that video, I did want to go to, there's a couple of other videos I want to play here. This one and that one. I want to go to a couple of other things. But anyway, let's bring this down and go to the article that we have. And I think I have a Reuters article and maybe someone else. Here's the Reuters. Oops. Here's the Reuters article. Biden's abortion rights rally in Virginia interrupted by Gaza protests. That's one headline, like I said, from Reuters. I think I have another one. Let me see what the other one is here. Do I? Maybe I don't. Oh, maybe not. So we'll go back to the Reuters. Oh no, I have 2 of the Palestinian one, the UAW. Okay, so that's the one I have 2 of. So let's just go to the Reuters article, and we're gonna read again. The title says Biden's abortion rights rally in Virginia interrupted by Gaza protests. This one written by Jeff Mason. And let's go to some of the article here. U.S. President Joe Biden took aim at Republicans over their effort to curb abortion rights in a Virginia speech on Tuesday, but his remarks were interrupted repeatedly by hecklers protesting his policies towards Israel. On the same day that people were voting for a Republican presidential candidate in New Hampshire, Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, in a bit of contempt of counter programming, held a rally about abortion, an issue that has proven to drive voters to the poll to oppose conservative measures. Quote, the person most responsible for taking away this freedom in America is Donald Trump, Biden said about the former president and current frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination. I'm going to skip down here. The crowd cheered for Biden, but it was not entirely friendly. Multiple interruptions forced Biden to pause or try to speak over shouts of ceasefire now and, quote, Genocide Joe, over his support for Israel and its assault on Gaza after a surprise attack by Hamas on Israel on October 7th last year. So, you know, this is the protest. But more broadly, and let me bring up this here. But more broadly, yeah, he's interrupted at this rally. But more broadly, will Biden be interrupted in November 2024? I think that's the more important question to answer, and we're going to do that right now. So let's go to those other two videos I wanted to show now that we've set up those videos. Here is Michigan Democrat raised concerns about Biden standing in swing states. So this is specifically Michigan, and this is a very short clip from Case Study QB, and then we'll get to the longer clip. Oop. Did I not click it? What happened here?
Democrats like Governor Whitmer and Congressman Kildee say that Democrats cannot take their state and their voters for granted.
Are you concerned here in Michigan about the state staying blue?
I think everyone should always focus on Michigan. It's always going to be close in this state.
How concerned are you that the president is struggling in your state?
Yeah, we've got work to do. There's no question about it. Former President Trump's supporters are rabid. They're religious about their support for him. A lot of the challenges we're having right now is just bringing Democrats home, getting that enthusiasm up again.
Meanwhile, in Michigan, Democrats like Governor Whitmer and Congressman Kildee say that Democrats cannot take their state and their vote.
So that was the first video. That one's from CNN, where they're talking about, and that's Governor Whitmer talking about, we need to make sure we keep an eye on on Michigan. But I'm not sure, it could be too little too late, unless you can resurrect or bring back 30,000 dead Palestinians. I think it might be too little too late, and Biden may be interrupted in 2024 by Trump because of Palestine. Let's listen to this video. This is from Dearborn, Michigan.
I will not vote for Joe Biden in the 2024 election. The cost of a Palestinian life means more to me than anything else.
We traveled to Dearborn, Michigan, home to the largest Arab American population in the U.S., to find out how the Biden administration's unwavering support of Israel is impacting their view of the president.
I will never vote for any Democrat again after what they did to us this time.
Nowadays, if you're voting for Biden, or even if you're voting for Trump, you're putting yourself into a situation where other people's lives are at stake.
We're really dealing with a very difficult, it's like between a rock and a hard place at that point.
Honestly, I'm leaning towards not voting in the first place.
So I pray and hope at that point there's going to be some sort of a change. We're not just ticking a box because we have no choice.
I don't see any difference in the policy between both of them. At least about Trump, you know what he's going to do. You will not feel betrayed. I mean, I really feel betrayed with what Biden did this time.
For many Palestinian Americans, the violence in Gaza is not a distant reality. It's very close to home.
Do you know how many family members you've lost so far?
It's 20. Yeah, so 4 on Saturday, 4 on Monday, and 12 on Wednesday.
A recent poll showed that support for Biden among Arab Americans fell from 59% in 2020 to just 17% today.
A lot of our community members are coming to me. They're saying, Neda, we're either going to vote third party, we are not going to vote top ticket, or we're going to stay home.
Surveys estimate Biden won more than 2/3 of the Muslim vote in the US in 2020. But if those voters switch or even stay home, it could cost Biden a crucial swing state and potentially the 2024 election.
In Michigan alone, we had 145,000 Michigan Muslims go out to vote, and Biden won by 155,000 votes.
You know, we really went out for Biden, and historically, whoever wins Michigan wins the presidency. And really, I use the word that we saved Biden in Michigan.
He cannot win without our vote. I think he's taking it for granted.
When Biden was running against Trump, I thought that Biden would be somebody who would lead with compassion, would lead with humanity. I thought he would be somebody that was a little bit different, but clearly I was wrong.
History will not forgive him for doing this. We will not forgive him for this when November comes next year. We will not forget.
This is not looking good for Joe Biden. Do those people sound like they're going to switch up later? I don't get the impression that anybody in this video who spoke, anybody that we've covered in some other segments about the abandoned Biden movement, they don't sound like they're going to just change their mind. But that's just me. Let's get to now some other matters here. Oops, not this one. It's another topic. Starts with an I. This one right here. So I want to get into this next topic here because when we're talking about Michigan and actually I can bring this down. Let's just bring it down. When we're talking about Michigan, we're talking about the election, and Biden is worried that we're not going to come out in Michigan for him. There's people in the petty bourgeois, the professional managerial class, who claim to be for democracy. They claim to be, these for this Democratic Party that's for democratic values, but they have a huge problem with third parties. And let me see what I have in my notes here for this segment here. I'll say this. Yeah, let me read what I have written down here. These social democratic media outlets like the Intercept are just like the social democratic politician, mostly aligned with the establishment talking points with a touch of semi-left or pseudo-left policies. And I'm going to say that again, because the Intercept is seen as some sort of left, non-establishment sort of media apparatus, but people like Aaron Good, who has been on here, who's a writer and author, who studies the deep state, he says that's likely a intelligence cutout, the Intercept. But I digress. We're going to read this article here where the Intercept, a supposed progressive or non-establishment outlet, is pushing against third parties. But not only that, guess what they're using? They're using the if you vote for third parties, you're voting for Trump argument that we all have heard who are in the spaces of the third party spaces. But let's read some of this article. Truly ridiculous. Yeah, let's read. We're going to be stopping and starting a lot here. Just to give you a heads up. It's a lot that's said here that's completely ridiculous. Actually, let me make sure I said everything I wanted to say in my... Okay. The Intercept pushes Trump derangement and says a vote for third party is a vote for Trump. That's essentially what this article says. Let's read. American presidential elections are binary. Either a Democrat or a Republican wins. Nobody else. To me, and I'm going to pause here, to me, doesn't that scream not a democracy? If you can make this first two sentences, that alone, actually is more, this first part, because it's a bunch of sentences broken up, this first part screams to me not a democracy. But I digress. Let's continue. The 2004 presidential election will be between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. No matter how much Americans may wish for other candidates, that's not the choice. You mean the American people want something else a democracy should deliver, right? Third-party candidates don't win, can't win. They only steal votes from the mainstream Republican and Democratic candidates with whom they are most closely aligned with. Now, let's examine this obvious lie. The Green Party. Is the Green Party most aligned with the Democratic Party? Green Party believes in climate change. They believe in something like a $15 to $20 trillion investment in the climate crisis. They believe in reparations. They believe in defund the military. They believe in defund police. Like what part of that is aligned with the Democratic Party? Democratic Party believes in strength through militarism. Democratic Party believes in suppressing minimum wage. But this article says, and this author says, third parties are most aligned with either Republican or Democrat. Now, libertarian, maybe on social issues, they align with Republicans. But on privacy and war, they do not. So to me, that's not accurate. But I continue with the article. They help the candidate at the opposite end of the political spectrum. This year, progressives, now let me make sure, because I get this clear. They help the candidate at the opposite end of the spectrum. This is why it is so important for them to say, you're closely aligned with the Democratic Party. If you're to break up this point of how you're not closely aligned, then the point of saying they help the candidate of the opposite end of the spectrum falls flat. And in the case of Joe Biden and Donald Trump, that does fall flat. And I'm going to pause here and go to my tweet to talk about that. Where was I? Let's go here. And I think I have, I'll just go here because I know it's in my, here it goes. Here's my tweet. It's getting pretty good numbers. It's about to hit 900 likes, 18,000 views. And to the point that I'm making here about Donald Trump and Biden being very similar. Taking off? Okay. All right, babe. Wife taking off to get the girls. That's why I'm able to go a little bit longer today. Wife is working from home today. But voting for Trump gets you nothing. Actually, let me say this again for those listening. I'm reading the tweet. Voting for Trump gets you nothing. Voting for Biden gets you nothing. Voting for a third party gets you a clear conscience. I'd say that's a win. But understand both parties, both administrations will not deliver on the things you want. Don't let them tell you what they're delivering on for you. They need to tell you what they're delivering on for you that you asked for. Don't let them, oh, NLRB, I delivered. I didn't ask for no NLRB appointment. Sorry, not counting that because I didn't ask for it. So if you're in the space that I am in, these are some of the things that are important to us. So this is why you can't and shouldn't fall for lesser of two evils. Lesser of two evils for what you want, not for what they tell you is important. If Trump wins, no single payer health care, no increase to minimum wage, still working paycheck to paycheck, still giving $900 billion for war each year. That's on paper is well over $1 trillion each year, and nothing on climate. That's if Trump wins. Now, let's see if there's a different set of things if Biden wins. Now, if Biden wins, no, there's still no single payer health care, still no increase to minimum wage, still working paycheck to paycheck, still $900 billion for war each year, and still climate change. So it begs to ask the question, if you aren't getting anything from any administration, why are you falling for the lesser of two evils? Unless you buy into Santa Claus. The Santa Claus effect, what I call the January 6th, the end of democracy argument. Let's get back to the Intercept article. Where is it here? Am I tripping? Oh, right here. It has a black icon just like Twitter X, so couldn't tell. They helped the candidate at the opposite end of the spectrum. This year, progressives who vote for a third-party candidate and don't vote at all are really voting for Trump. Let me say that again, everybody who's not voting for Trump, but you're not voting for Biden too. Let me explain to you how you really are voting for Donald Trump according to the Intercept. This year, progressives who vote for a third-party candidate or don't vote at all are really voting for Trump. And then this is their circular logic here. In 1992, Ross Perot ran one of the most significant third-party campaigns in American history, winning nearly 20% of the vote. The Dallas entrepreneur campaigned as a folksy populist conservative, a slightly crazy-sounding fiscal and trade hawk with a billionaire business resume, sort of a precursor to Trump, but without the racism, fascism, and criminality. How's he precursor to Trump when you guys say that's all Trump is? You guys say Trump is racist, fascist, and he's a criminal. Anyway, Perot took millions of votes from, you can't take votes in a democracy, took millions of votes from the disaffected Republicans angered by President George W. Bush, willingness to compromise with congressional Democrats on taxes. When Bush ran for president in 1988, one of his key campaign pledges had been not to raise taxes. His reversal once he was in office fuels Perot's rise. Ross Perot's strong showing in 1992 ensured that the election of Bill Clinton, returning to the Democrats the White House for the first time since Jimmy Carter. So, and I may read a little bit more. Actually, I'm going to read more of this. Let's continue with their assessment here. Now, I'm going to get past the Ross Perot stuff and he's going to zero back in on the topic, and that's here where he starts here. A MAGA dark age. None of the third-party candidates this year are likely to come close to Ross Perot's 1992 vote total, but it is possible that a combination of left-wing votes for third-party candidates and low voter turnout among young progressives because of an apathy to Biden could damage the Democratic incumbent in a handful of critical states and doom his reelection bid, that would put Trump back in the White House. And again, if Trump, whether Trump is in the White House or Biden in the White House, what do we not get? We don't get single payer health care. We don't get anybody doing anything to climate change. We don't get anything to minimum wage. It's the same thing. Both administrations deliver materially the same thing. So don't fall for this. Vote your conscience. Vote against genocide. And that's for third parties. That's for Cornel West. That's for Jill Stein. Cornel West, Jim Stein. Not RFK. Who else is? Oh, and Claudia Dela Cruz. I knew it was 3. And let's continue with the article. So, just to be clear, the article says, a progressive who doesn't vote, or that goes for you, Rome, or votes in a general election for RFK Jr., that goes for a lot of you in our audience that still like RFK Jr., or those who vote for Cornel West, that's definitely a lot of you in our audience that vote for Cornel West, or Jill Stein, which is likely me, or Claudia Dela Cruz, one of those two I'm going to vote for, or whoever No Labels puts up as a candidate is voting for Trump. So you understand? So when you go into the election booth, imagine if you went into the election booth and it said Joe Biden and then it said Trump 4 times. Joe Biden, Trump, 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 Trump. That's essentially what the Intercept is saying we're going to see when we go into that election booth. We're going to see Joe Biden, and then we're going to see Trump's name 4 times. We're going to see it when it says Donald Trump. We're going to see it when it says RFK Jr. We're going to see it when it says Cornel West. We're going to see it when it says Jill Stein. I will add a 4th. We're going to see it when it says Claudia Dela Cruz. Let's continue. A Trump presidency means the return of a vengeful maniac to the White House, determined to destroy anyone who gets in the way of his lust for power and ambition to become an American dictator. Let's be clear, I'll pause here. America already has a form of dictatorship. It's called the dictatorship of capital. Who's always elected every single year? Donors, right? Who's always elected every single year? Wall Street? Who's elected every single year? Healthcare lobbyists. Dictation of capital. Just a different face. That's all. But let's continue. It means the ascendancy of a deranged MAGA Republican agenda, more vicious and poisonous than ever before, an agenda that will usher in a dark age for the United States. That agenda would likely bring major wars abroad and cultural fundamentalism at home. This article said will bring major wars abroad. Is this serious? I guess the Intercept has no idea about what Joe Biden is doing in the Middle East. What Joe Biden has done to Yemen that's going to spark a war. I guess they don't know anything about that. I guess they don't know about the Ukraine proxy war. Nothing about that one. What about going around Congress and supplying weapons and funds to Ukraine? I mean, to Israel. What about preparing for war with China? Yet this article says the agenda would likely bring war. Yet Trump is going to bring war. Now, you and I have both lived through the Trump presidency and the Biden presidency. Let's call them administration. Trump administration, Biden administration. Did the Trump administration oversee a genocide in Palestine? Did the Trump administration supply weapons and support to a proxy war in Ukraine? And I'm not advocating for voting for Donald Trump. I'm just stating facts. MAGA world wants war with China. Oh my God, these people. Oh my God. Just lies. MAGA world wants war with China. Both establishments want war with China and Mexico. Trump and his backers would undoubtedly support the complete Israeli takeover of Gaza Strip and the West Bank and the dislocation of millions of Palestinians. He would endorse a Russian victory of cutting off U.S. aid to Ukraine. A U.S. withdrawal from Europe would likely follow, along with Russia's invasion of the Baltic states. If this is supposed to be a successful attempt at advocating your position of not supporting a third party, it's not working. If this is supposed to be an attempt at advocating, not even supporting Donald Trump, it's not working, because look what they say here. You know, have you not looked at the polling of the American public about financially supporting the Ukraine war? But he says this: he would endorse a Russian victory by cutting off U.S. support to aid. That's what Americans want to do. Are you trying to elect Donald Trump? Intercept? And then they just state this clown shit right here. NATO talking point. He's going to invade the rest of Europe if we let that happen. It's just clown shit. It's not even worthy more than just calling it clown shit. Despite acknowledging that it would be bad politics, Trump would almost certainly support a complete nationwide ban on abortion and probably also endorse Christian fundamentalist demands to ban contraception, along with nationwide ban on books. And that we should take as a trade-off to genocide, I guess. That is such a managerial class point of view, to think that abortion and banned books supersede a genocide taking place. That is so bizarre. But it is only a point of view you can have if you live in a bubble, like the professional managerial class does. Get to some super chats soon. My apologies for not getting through. I knew I had a lot to get through, so I was trying to get through the presentation. But let's continue. Where did I lead off? His aides are already on record calling for the creation of contraception camps for immigrants, while he has made it clear he wants to prosecute and imprison his political opponents. Now, this part, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I'm sorry, not that part right there. This part right here. While he made it clear he wants to prosecute and imprison his political opponents, you're doing that to him right now. So, like I said, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Now, let's continue, and I want to get to past some of this Trump derangement to this last part. Not there. Right here. This article goes on to say that they are right. Trump poses an existential danger to the United States. Progressives should not make the same mistake that Ernest Thälmann made in 1932. Stalemate made in 1932. The leader of the German Communist Party. How dare you bring up the Communist Party? Ernest saw mainstream liberals as his enemies. And so the center and left never joined forces against the Nazis. Ernest famously said that some Nazi trees must not be allowed to overshadow a forest of social democrats whom he sneeringly called social fascists. I mean, I don't know the audience that would buy this circular nonsense and hearkening back to this communist leader and interjecting him. That's Jason Rising. That's his article, guys. I don't have much else to say. It's pretty terrible. Let's just say that. But let's get back to the next part here. Just moseying on along down the line, and now we're gonna get to Marianne Williamson here, and the reason I wanted to insert this Marianne Williamson short segment was because in talking about, actually let me go to super chats because I want to include this part in the clip so let me go to super chats first before I say that part. I want this part to be included in the segment. So let's do super chats, then I'll get into that. But yeah, we're gonna get to Marianne Williamson next here. And she goes on Democracy Now! All right, so let's read some super chats here. Here goes one. Yo, check your mic. It's bad. Yes, thank you, Sam. I said it with it. I don't know why I said it with that accent. It just came out because I saw yo. But thanks, Sam, for that. I did notice it too late, but it's better now. A Biden 71, always showing love with the super stickers. Thank you for that, sir. And I did put this up earlier, but I didn't read. Let's read it now. Don't forget that Dem primary voters are a cult. Whenever the party tells them it tells them is what they do. Dem primary voters are not shout verse voters. Is that shout verse voters? I'm assuming that is. We can expect a lot of vote shaming in the next few months, and I agree with you, Janice. Thank you for the super chat. This one from Mr. English. Keep up the great work. And that is American Descendants of Slavery, ATL branch. Solidarity to you, Mr. English. Another one from Janice. Thank you for this one. Binary. So what? I refuse to give my consent in the form of a vote to fascists. Quote, I would rather voters what I want, vote for what I want and not get it, than vote for what I don't want and get it. That is so true. And I'll say it, I butchered it. Maybe there's a misspelling here. I would rather vote for what I want and not get it. I want apple pie and not get it, than to vote for some black jelly beans and get it. So that's another great point made by Janice. Thank you, Janice. She goes on to say, I'm voting third party. Here's one from DC. The fake ass bourgeoisie UAW just endorsed Biden. Yes. Knew they were going to do it. So they completed their sellout circle and tricked us all into believing they were all radical in the speech that he used. Because remember, Sean Fain went through a very radical election where he was pulled left because he was running against Liam. What's his name? Lee. I can't remember his name, but he was running against. He was a redheaded guy, another redheaded person. He's running against a redheaded guy. He's a socialist. He's part of this union. But that guy was very radical. So Sean had to be pulled left. That's why you hear him talking in this radical language. It's because he was pulled that way. And right, he completed this sellout circle. So now let's get to this. And now let me preface this story with a couple of things. So the Democratic Party is truly a sick party. So you may say, oh, that's the party, right? That's the other people. That's the Nancy Pelosi's. That's the I guess you can even say the Joe Biden's. But me, I want to vote for a progressive, right? So let's examine that through the lens of Marianne Williamson. And this is what I have. This is what I have written down for this. This is the left options in the Democratic Party. Okay, Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson in this video is going to use identity politics to push something unserious like her peace department. And the main sort of overarching theme of this segment about Marianne Williamson is an example of how progressive Democrats, aka social Democrats, are unserious and have unserious solutions to serious problems. So that's how I'm going to preface this. Oops, I'll put that one back up and take down this comment. And now let's listen. I'll stop and start. This is B1. I'm not listening to this all the way through and then coming back. So I can't listen to Marianne Williamson that much. So I'm starting from the beginning, stopping and starting for this particular video. Let's listen.
Welcome to Democracy Now! Can you talk about the fact that you are the only person on the Democratic ticket right now of the major Democratic candidates who is supporting a Gaza ceasefire, and then go into your call for a Department of Peace?
The ceasefire, even before the invasion of Gaza by the Israelis, I was on a video saying I thought it was a bad idea. And I have been calling for a ceasefire since the moment it began. You know, obviously there's a big difference between supporting Israel and supporting the Israeli government. There's a big difference between supporting Israel and supporting the policies of Benjamin Netanyahu. And I've been very sorry to see the U.S. government.
So let me stop it here. This is such a social Democrat thing. You see how she comes out and she's kind of proud. Ceasefire. Yeah, ceasefire. Because understand, from the social Democrat perspective, social democracy, progressive Democrat, a ceasefire is the top. That's the climax. That's the most radical thing you can do in support of the Palestinian people, is the ceasefire. That's why she's so proud. That's why they're leading with this. That's why she's so proud to always sort of boast about this. That's a better way of saying it. So let's listen some more.
The ceasefire, even before the invasion of Gaza by the Israelis, I was on a video saying I thought it was a bad idea. And I have been calling for a ceasefire since the moment it began. You know, obviously there's a big difference between supporting Israel and supporting the Israeli government. There's a big difference between supporting Israel and supporting the policies of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Now, this is another thing. You see how she watches TV. That's all she does to get her talking points. She watches TV to get her talking points from the establishment. This is why she has so many establishment point of views. Because this is what the establishment, the Democratic establishment right now is trying to push. They're trying to separate the state of Israel and their policies from Netanyahu as if it's separate. Like before the Likud party got in with Netanyahu this last time, like Israel and the state of Israel wasn't terrible, oppressive apartheid state before that. But they trying to paint it like, oh, it's Netanyahu. That's all. That's social Democrats. The ability to go this far without doing anything, critiquing, and this is the analogy, critiquing the Atlantic slave trade and the conditions of slavery. Let's get conditions for slaves better. Never saying I want to get rid of the system of slavery. You see? Social democracy.
Netanyahu. And I've been very sorry to see the U.S. government go along with his policy and this war. I think it's a terrible idea. It's terrible for Israel, obviously terrible for the Palestinians, for the region, and I think for the world. In terms of the Department of Peace, you know, Franklin Roosevelt said we need to do more than end wars. We need to end the beginnings of all wars. Just like with health and sickness, you don't just treat sickness, you learn to cultivate.
We need to end our wars. We need to be in the end of all wars. Enters the Peace Department. Marianne Williamson has got to be one of the most ridiculous people ever to have run for office that I've ever encountered. I haven't encountered everybody, but she is one of the most ridiculous candidates I've ever seen. She has no business running. She has no knowledge about pretty much anything outside of what she does for a living. She gets her talking points from the establishment. She's closely aligned with the establishment, and she leans into some progressive talking points. And then we have the professional managerial class known on the left, known as the NATO left, want to push her. That's essentially Marianne Williamson. Just so she can write a book.
Cultivate health, and we need to not just drop bombs and put people in prison when there is conflict. We need to learn to prevent conflict. We need to learn to proactively create peace. And there are four main factors involved in what's called.
She's talking about diplomats. This is what the State Department is supposed to be. Marianne, the State Department, you're talking about diplomacy. Stopping a fight, stopping a war before it happens. That's diplomacy, what you're talking about. And see, we have that. That's the State Department. They're just not doing it. They're supposed to be doing diplomacy. It's just that a State Department in an empire, an imperialist empire, doesn't do diplomacy. They do war instead and make excuses for it. I'm going to let it play a little bit more. I'm not going to listen to much of this, but because there's another video, they do dissidents video when they cover her actually in person. So that's the more interesting one.
Called peace building. And when these factors are present, statistically, that means there's going to be a higher incidence of peace and a lower incidence of conflict. And this is true whether it's a corner of an American city or another place in the world. And those factors are great.
Now, listen to what she says here. Let's just listen to what she says here.
Place in the world. And those factors are greater economic opportunities for women, greater educational opportunities for children, a reduction of violence against women, and an amelioration of unnecessary human despair. So just like that.
So Marianne Williamson is using identity politics to sell her peace department. Did you hear it? Two of the points that supposedly indicate peace or a peaceful place or peaceful state, two of them had to do with women. You mean it has nothing to do with military? You know how many markers there is that you can indicate you're in a peaceful state? But she chooses to use identity politic points, which to me is a red flag on her being serious or not. Even about her own sort of policy push. Are you serious when you're pushing a policy and you want to make it a point through identity politics to push your idea of a peace department? To me, that tells me you're not serious about it. You just want to gain support through identity politics for this peace department. It's not serious whatsoever. But anyway, let's bring up. I'm tired of this one. I'm done with her. Let's bring up the next thing, and that's this video from Dissidents, and they went out to visit Marianne Williamson. You can see her right there. This is actually Keaton. Actually Keaton, the same Keaton who destroys her on camera. She has no idea this is who she's speaking to. But let's listen to Keaton make some phenomenal points, and let's hear her answer.
You're down in single digits. I don't mean any disrespect by that. I'm just saying it's not necessarily because of the race you ran, and I don't agree with you on everything for sure. It's because of the party in which you're running. Look around. You got morons on the street here saying we're going to write in Joe Biden. Joe Biden's not even running in this race. He's got people writing his name in 60, 70%. So if we can harness this energy that you're talking about, and I have a lot of respect for that vision, if we can harness this into mutual aid networks with the understanding that we are not a voting majority, but we can harness this.
You understand what he's saying? Saying we're not a voting majority. Harness this energy you have instead of putting it in a dead-end Democratic Party that has nothing but cowbell left supporters. That's why they're writing in Joe Biden, even though you're on the ballot. Harness this energy through a mutual aid and understand we're not a voting majority. We don't have enough people to affect change in any of these corporate uniparty, any of these corporate members of the uniparty. So let's do something else. That's what he's essentially breaking down. Let's let him finish and hear her answer.
This power in other ways to help each other survive the inevitable demise of this country, which we all know is coming, do we not? I mean, we feel it, right? It's going to be Biden. It's going to be Trump. It's probably going to end up being Trump. So there you have it, right? So what do we do at that point?
I am 100% not enrolled in your analysis.
All right.
He's 100% not enrolled in his analysis at all. That is such a terrible saying. But let's listen to what she says.
Fair enough.
So, first of all, 70% of Americans, 70% of Democrats have been saying for months that they wanted to hear from other voices than Joe Biden. So you can't say that there was no hunger for something else. As far as how
they're writing him in, though. I'm sorry, I'll let you finish, but they're going to write him in. He's going to win as a write-in.
From New Hampshire?
Okay. No, I'm not.
She's like, you motherfucker. Wait till she sees the video. She's gonna be like, that's those Dissident fellows over there. Wait till she sees it if she hasn't seen it already. I think Dissidents has covered it and clipped it already.
No, I'm not coming from New Hampshire, but I'm reading the data.
Okay, where do you come from?
I'm from New York.
Yeah, that sounds like a New Yorker talking to the New Hampshire.
That sounds like a New Yorker talking. Now, Keaton does better than me because I would have said, yeah, I'm from, I don't give a fuck where she think I'm from. Yeah, I'm from New Hampshire. Yeah. You're giving them an out. You get what I'm saying? That's the reason why I would just lie and say, oh, no, I'm from New Hampshire. That's all you need to know. I'm here now. That's all you need to know. I'm here now. So yeah, I'm from New Hampshire. That's what I would have said, Keaton. Because giving her a different answer would give her an out. And it did, and she does. Take that out. Well, it just sounds like a New Yorker. What does that mean?
All right, well, the numbers don't lie. I don't.
Yeah, she thinks that, you see, that's her way of not answering the question. But this is the progressive Democrats that you think the left should support in the Democratic Party. Weak people like this who chooses to use a trope about foreigners to get out of answering a legitimate critique and point that Keaton made. Yeah, these NATO left progressive Democrats, social Democrats, yeah, they look like they got the spine to take over the Democratic Party. That makes sense. Clown shit, like I always say. Do dissidents video. Now we're rounding in to one of the final parts of this, because all of these segments, all of the stories I've covered, is to get to this final point here, and that is Democrats are truly sick, forcing their voters to pick between abortion rights and genocide. And let's I got a couple of videos on this particular segment. Yeah, right here. So let's cover a couple of things. First, this is the tweet that spurred this whole concept for this for today's show. Oops. And so I'll read the tweet first and then get into some other items here. The Democratic Party is so sick and demented that they want to force their constituency to pick between abortion rights and genocide. A political party that presents this choice to their own base is a political party that deserves 0 votes. And that is so true. Imagine, actually, before I get to that point, let's go back before I get to the imagine point. Now in this video, because this is the young lady that went on, is it CNN? Went on Face the Nation as one of the abandoned Biden movement people in Detroit, in Michigan. So that's who this is. We're going to be listening to her in this segment. It's a very short video. And then we'll get into some of the other things I wanted to say. Actually, let me preface this way. And that is, think about what type of person would try to force you to choose between your mother and your father, or 2 best friends. The very sort of presentation of abortion rights versus genocide tells you, anybody who presents that as a choice to you, is that a friend to you? Like, is it what the person who would present, choose your mother or your father, is that a friend to you that would ask you to make that choice? Consider you love your mother and father, had the same experience with them, and you love them both equally. That's essentially what they're doing here. Choose genocide or choose abortion rights. Now, I would argue, why would you guys buy in them being advocates for you for abortion rights when they lost the right for you? You were already voting them in to protect your voting rights, and the Democrats representing you and your and your abortion rights were taken away. So why are you now going to pick the same advocate moving forward for your abortion rights that let them go in the first place? Why would you do that? Does that make sense? Let's listen to this video. It's a very short video. And her name is Saba. She was on the Nick at Night show last night with Rome and Nick last night.
Saba, you said reproductive rights are a huge factor for you, but that you probably won't vote for President Biden.
I think it would be hypocritical of me to use reproductive rights as a way to justify voting for Biden when Biden is aiding and sending military aid to Israel, which is airstriking Gaza and blocking humanitarian aid leading to women there who are pregnant either getting C-sections without anesthesia, not being able to be provided with prenatal.
Saba, you said reproductive.
Wasn't that beautiful? What Saba said there, and I've never heard a good answer when presented. I'm not saying that we say good answers to when this question is presented, but this is the first time I've seen on corporate media there be a very coherent, understandable, easily digestible answer. This is the first time, in my opinion, that I've heard it on corporate media. But listen to the comparison that she makes. She says, isn't that hypocritical? Because if I'm for abortion rights here, what about the women that's over in Gaza? Or do they count as part of our support for women? I wonder if she had an answer, because in this video, in this video, there's the answer. One second, everybody. I subscribe to YouTube TV, so I'm able to go back and all politics I record. I don't know if I have it though. Did I record this? What is she wearing? Oh no, this is completely different. She's wearing something different in this episode, so I don't know where they got this focus group, because I'm looking at the episode and I don't see the focus group yet. But not only that, and most of it and part of it, she's not even wearing what we see on the screen. Like the interview with Gretchen Whitmore she does, she's not wearing what we see here on the screen. I wonder, is this like an extended version? Because before that is Nikki Haley. All right. Well, anyway, I can't find the answer to this, which is so weird. Yeah, that's a completely different day. I'm looking at Face the Nation, this last episode. But anyway, that's a completely different day. Can't find any sort of reply. Maybe I can find a longer version of this. Let's play it one more time.
Saba, you said reproductive rights are a huge factor for you, but that you probably won't vote for President Biden.
I think it would be hypocritical of me to use reproductive rights as a way to justify voting for Biden when Biden is aiding and sending military aid to Israel, which is airstriking Gaza and blocking humanitarian aid, leading to women there who are pregnant either getting C-sections without anesthesia, not being able to be provided with prenatal.
You know why that's so smart? Because she's saying I'm not supporting. That's essentially an argument saying I'm not supporting him because I'm supporting the women in Gaza. There's no answer to that. I feel like there can be no answer to that. But let's see. Face the Nation. I don't know what this would be. Saba, maybe. I put her name. And maybe I can get a longer version of this same video. This is something I didn't prepare, but now I am really interested. Maybe it's not here. So Face the Nation panel. I'm trying to keep it as vague as I can so that it doesn't exclude anything. How about Michigan? Michigan. All right, I'm gonna give up here in a second. Face the Nation. Let's take panel out. Oh, there we go. So panel is what was obstructing it. So this looks like this is one of the videos. I'll play this one in a second, but I'm looking for the one. Yeah, this is from the 21st. I was looking at the 21st episode. I'm looking for the one with Saba.
The last few Supreme Court nominees, the process was totally.
It's not.
I don't think they would put it out. I think I would have to find it with somewhere else. But anyway, I'm not gonna find it in time. So let's just back away from it and go to this other video. That's right here. And this is another Arab American in Detroit speaking about how he's not going to support Joe Biden also. So let's listen to the other abandoned Biden member in this panel.
Tyson, you did change your mind.
Yes.
On the president. Why?
I was a champion for Joe Biden until October 7th. I feel he's disowned us, disenfranchised us with his stance on Gaza.
What do you mean by that?
He's not listening to us. We are asking for a ceasefire at this time. It's a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Too many lives are being lost at this time. I was never a single issue voter. In fact, I used to argue with people not to be single issue voters, but for me, this is a deal breaker.
Mm-hmm.
Way too many lives have been lost.
When you say us, you're Muslim. Is that what
Yes.
you mean? Mm-hmm. You think the Muslim community here feels as you do?
Yes, I think a vast majority of Muslims, Arab Americans, even progressives who I identify myself as a progressive, and many people that I talk to in my circles are not going to be voting for Joe Biden.
Tyson, you did change your mind
Yes.
Let me pause
on
it.
the president. Why?
That's devastating. Understand if they're because the other three are Biden simps, except for the guy's a Republican. I think the other two are for Biden or something like that. If these are the two that they screen and made it this far, do you know how many other ones was like fuck Biden? Because they typically screen these people and they get the most favorable critiquer, if you will. I know it's not a word, but the most favorable person who's critiquing Biden, they usually go with the one who's most favorable in their critiques to put on these panels for public consumption. And I'm saying if these two, Saba and this gentleman, made it through, I mean, man, they must have had people that was like, fuck Biden all the way to hell, I guess. But I did have another abandoned Biden segment that I didn't get to that well. So I did have another receipt I wanted to insert here from that. I think it's from here. Yeah. Here, yeah. I want to do this. So the abandoned Biden movement is now 50 states, and I want to play this here. This is another guy. He's part of the abandoned Biden movement, and let's listen to what he says.
I stand here today in my individual capacity, and as a person of conscience and a person of faith, we stood and we declared almost a month ago, 1 month into the genocide that is unfolding in Gaza, to announce that the Muslim community has abandoned President Biden. And now, with more than 75 days of the onslaught and the continuing genocide that is unfolding in Gaza, I'm here to say that at my personal capacity, not have I only abandoned President Biden, but I will do everything in my personal capacity to campaign against President Biden in the upcoming election. As a person of faith, as a person of conscience, I cannot support someone who funds, facilitates a genocide and refuses to call for a ceasefire to protect human life. And let this as well serve as a message not only to the current administration, but any administration to come in the future, and specifically the Democratic Party, that the Muslim community will not stay silent, and people of faith and people of conscience and people of justice will not stay silent to witness a genocide unfold. And we need to put an end and demand a ceasefire as soon as we can.
And I really think that they are underestimating the Muslim community. The Muslim community has a lot more backbone. They get this a lot better. And there's an article by I think it might be Margaret Kimberly, where she talks about this, like how the black community can learn something from Muslim Americans organizing in this space about abandon Biden. So I might bring that up, but let me show you, or go back to, shoot, there's so many things open right now. Is it this one? Let's see here. Oh, well, it's not, but I can find it. All right, so that's the abandoned Biden. What was I just about to show you? I forgot. Abandoned Biden. Let me go back to my. Oh, yeah, there was another receipt in the abandoned Biden thing that I wanted to show. That's what I'm getting to. My bad, everybody. So there's that video I just showed ya. And where is that article? Is it this one? Yeah, this is the article. Okay. Let's move to this article. We're in the extra overtime right now. We've already completed all of our segments. Now I'm just kind of doing a little bit more real-time research. U.S. Muslim leaders plan to abandon Biden in 2024 U.S. election over Gaza stance. And here's some more details about it. U.S. Muslim leaders have announced their plans for a nationwide campaign to vote out U.S. President Joe Biden in the upcoming presidential election. That's very key to understand. It's not just we're not voting for him. They are campaigning against him. So it's a little bit different. Let's go to the next one. The recently launched Abandon Biden campaign says on its website that the Biden administration failure to call for a ceasefire in Israel on the besieged Gaza Strip prompted community leaders to take action. The campaign ambitiously aims to tackle Biden in all 50 states, as it says that organizers has begun rallying in October in 9 states, including as Nevada, Minnesota, Arizona, Wisconsin. Quote, Biden abandoning of Muslim Americans compels Muslim leaders to abandon Biden, the statement read. As the new year approaches, Muslim Americans, this was December, leaders call for peace in America, the Muslim world, and people around the world. And there's a couple of other things here I wanted to show. Let's go back. I'll just go from here. Let's go to Twitter from here. So, any other breaking news? Somebody in the chat said UAW has endorsed Biden, so that's bad news. That's pretty cool. War criminal. All right, so now I'm just gonna scroll through the feed end of the show to see what is new. Oh, this is beautiful right here. Listen to this Freudian slip. This is a Zionist. This is a young Zionist. Nick calls her Mossad agent, young Mossad agent, in his tweet about this. This is a viral tweet. This is a viral video, I should say. So this is a Zionist who is on here. You know, they want to put these young faces, young female white faces on to show purity and innocence, to project a particular message. So they bring her up here, but she has a Freudian slip here. Let's listen to it. It's
Listen to facts and focus on healing Burlington. And I would like to use the rest of my time to say how appalled I am that people are bringing up the Holocaust. Do not use other genocides to describe this one. I have been.
We're not gonna tolerate that.
This one that I personally do not see. It is a horrible, horrible, horrible situation, and I cry for my Palestinian sisters.
If you didn't catch it, she was not supposed to call this one a genocide. If you didn't catch it there. And it sounded like the young people in the audience made her understand you made a mistake, and she was horrified. But she got back into character very, very quickly.
We're not gonna tolerate that.
Oops, I didn't go back far enough. Let's go back far enough.
Use other genocides to describe this one. I have been.
We're not gonna tolerate that.
This one that I personally do not see. It is a horrible, horrible, horrible situation, and I cry for my Palestinian sisters and brothers. But I want to say I have been to Poland. I have visited concentration camps. And do not say that is what litters Gaza and the West Bank. I have been in the West Bank, and I have seen the Arab villages there. Do not tell me what is there. I have seen it with my own eyes.
Clown shit. Clown. Anyway, we're going to cover this in a long form version. Probably Nick might cover this tomorrow night because I've seen him tweeting about it, and they made a hotspot about it. So he's probably going to cover that tomorrow night if you're interested. What else is going on? As Mike Wallace, Aaron Mate went on Judge Napolitano's show lately, so that's something new. State Department spokes struggles to account for IDF shooting a man waving a white flag. Wow. Maybe I think I'll end with this. I'm not going to play it now. I think because this will be interesting to watch. So we'll end with that. But let's see what final comments we got. We got one more super chat to read before we get out of here. This one from Jay Frizz. American professional managerial class feminism is Western chauvinism. That is spot on accurate. John, thank you for the super chat, but that is a spot on accurate assessment. We've said something similar to that many times, and I've heard many people say. So people understand what American feminism, we're sort of like Western feminism, is really just Western chauvinism. Absolutely. I don't know this video, but it's about the State Department and the IDF in Israel. So these are always good to see them squirm about supporting the terrible state of Israel. All right, so now that's going to be it. I'm going to be getting out here. Let me make sure I covered everything here. I covered the overall banner. I covered Van Jones. I got that one. Yes, I covered the Intercept. Yes, I covered Marianne Williamson. Yes. Covered the UAD prepares to sell out. Yes, and Biden interrupted. So we got through all topics today. Yes, clown shit. You can say that shit. You can say that again. If you want to shout out where you are, I'll throw it up as the video plays. Shout out where you are, what state you're in, what city you're in. If you're in another country, what country you're in. Let us know where you are and where you stand on Palestine, or where you stand on who you're going to vote for. If you're voting third party, say, hey, I'm John in Long Beach, California, and I'm voting for Claudia de la Cruz. Put that in your chat, in your message, starting now at 5:05 p.m. Messages after 5:05 p.m. I'll put up. Thank you for watching. I want to actually, that's it. I'm not going to make that announcement now, but thank you for watching, and hit that like button on your way out. Watch this video.
No, go ahead in the back. Yeah.
You may have had the chance to see some of the footage shot by our cameraman in the Gaza Strip, widely shared online, showing a group of men waving a white flag, representing no threat whatsoever, unarmed, and moving south to try and reach some relatives. The IDF opened fire, as you can see on that video, and killed one of them, Abu Salul. I wonder what your response to that is, and whether you think from watching that video, whether that potentially represents a war crime.
I have seen that footage, but I am not going to comment on the specifics around that, given I'm not aware of the full circumstances on the ground. And as we've said before, this is not an American operation. But
Well,
beyond
true.
that,
Nevertheless,
please don't.
you're fully
I'm happy to take your questions if you'll allow me. To answer. I don't interrupt you, and I ask you to not do the same. As a general matter, though, we have not parsed our words about the moral and strategic imperative that the government of Israel and the Israeli security forces have to take every effort possible to minimize civilian casualties and minimize impact on civilians. As it relates to the footage that your organization has shared, again, I'm just going to refrain from commenting on specific operations, as we do not have full circumstances of what on the ground from here. This isn't an American operation. I'm not on the ground there to speak to the full parameters of the situation. Any civilian death is heartbreaking, and any civilian life lost is one too many. And we have made that clear with the Israelis, and will continue to do so.
Beyond that comment about it being heartbreaking, which is a platitude we often hear, would you urge, given that you broadly support IDF operations in the Gaza Strip, would you support a Israeli investigation of what happened in that video? Given that they're waving a white flag and they represented no threat.
That is for the IDF to undertake and determine based on the circumstances of that situation. What I will say is that we have been clear to our Israeli partners that they need to take every possible measure to avoid civilian harm during an operation and investigate credible allegations of law or of war violations when they arise. But that is for our Israeli partners in the IDF to speak to.
Just on this, Vedant, you said
Yeah.
that we don't have the full facts or something like that in a minute. Like, did you actually reach out specifically to Israel about this footage and try to get whatever the facts that you guys are seeking?
This footage just arose earlier this morning, so I don't have any specifics of our diplomatic conversations around this to speak to.
How about the footage that arose last week and the week before and the week before and the week before and the week before, where there have been, if not similar, awfully close instances? Have you ever gotten an explanation from the Israelis? Have you ever gotten a finding from the Israelis of what their investigation, if they promised one?
I'm not going to speak to private diplomatic conversations, Matt, but this is something that we raise continuously with the Israelis. The secretary has done so, other officials in our government have done so, and will continue to do it.
Okay, well, have you ever gotten an answer from the Israelis?
I'm not gonna speak to the privacy of certain diplomatic conversations, Matt, but we have been clear that there is a moral and strategic imperative to take as many steps as possible to minimize civilian casualties.
That's fine that you say that, but then when you are asked specific questions like this relating to specific footage, and this is not the first time that this has happened. You've been asked repeatedly about this, and then you come back and say, well, we've raised questions with you. We've asked the Israelis questions. Have you ever gotten a response to any of those?
These conversations.
I'm not asking you for the details. I just want to know.
We have. These conversations are private. We have raised with the Israelis specific circumstances, and we have
you have
received
gotten answers?
Correct. I'm not going to speak to those conversations right now.
In any case, are you aware of that the Israelis say we screwed up here?
I'm just not going to speak to the private conversations, Matt.
And on this one, just to close
Yeah.
this, since it sounds like you haven't had a chance to ask about this one, are you planning to ask about this particular instance or no?
I'm just not going to speak to specific diplomatic conversations. What I will just reiterate, Humaira, is that we talk to our Israeli counterparts all the time, regularly, from various interlocutors across our government, and we'll continue to and front and center our engagements.
Why? It's even illegal in the state of Israel to obtain this. And if you do obtain it, it's illegal to show it.
DNA tests are illegal in Israel. Ask me why.
It's even illegal in the state of Israel to obtain this. And if you do obtain it, it's illegal to show it and or talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, my DNA. Now you might ask yourself, why is it illegal to obtain this in the state of Israel? Because it proves through your DNA that Jews around the world have no ancestral ties to the land of Israel.
I mean, duh. It doesn't take a PhD or an article from a Jewish newspaper to tell you that Caucasians practicing a religion aren't native to a place where people have been brown for millennia.
This TikTok caused a storm online, with many debating what his results, which show no trace of being from Palestine or the Middle East, despite being Jewish, mean. Yet, in the state of Israel, getting hold of a genealogical DNA test is highly restricted. Yet Dov Aharonov and the Jerusalem Post reported in 2019 that Israel's genetic information law blocks people from buying them from local pharmacies.
I guess boomer Zionists think that if you just throw enough money at troll farms and you don't let people Google 23andMe in Israel, that they'll forget that they're not Middle Eastern. Like, it's not Jesus of Williamsburg, it's Jesus of Nazareth, right? I mean, that's fine. Like, there are dark Jews. There's Jews from Brazil, there's Jews from Ethiopia, and up until the 19th century, everybody was living in Palestine pretty peacefully. Well, I guess until the Nakba, when they got displaced or killed alongside the Muslims and the Christians. I guess even back then, in the middle of the desert, if you have a brown neighbor, I guess property values go down. I don't make the rules, but they sure as hell are racist as So then, if Caucasian Jews don't come from the Middle East, duh, where do they come from? I do not want to be called anti-Semitic, even if I've got Harvard in the background. So I'm just going to let another Ashkenazi geneticist tell you where you come from.
Surprisingly, GPS took us to northeastern Turkey. At first, we did not understand the results, but when we looked at some old books, we found 4 ancient villages named Ishkenaz, Eskenaz, Ashenaz, and Ashkuz, names that may be derived from the word Ashkenaz. This place resides on a hub of trade networks. This is where Silk Roads and other trade routes converge.
That's Aaron Al-Hayek. He's a Jewish geneticist from Johns Hopkins who wanted to figure out where Caucasian Jews come from because, you know, like map out genome, get ahead of diseases. His contact in Israel is Dr. Aurelia Oppenheim. She's a geneticist in the University of Jerusalem, and she runs the anti-aging department. And for a while, the government called both of these two Nazis. Would you like to know why? Because they both figured out where Caucasian Jews come from. Wink, wink. They're 40% Turkish, and newsflash, 40% Mongolian. As if the lactose intolerance didn't give it away. Like, hold on. Do you understand what this means? Like, okay, sure. Like, you don't have any ancestral tie to Israel, but like you don't have yellow fever. You're just dating your own race. Like real talk. What do you see in this picture? Like, is it a pierogi or is it a dumpling? Like, you say gefilte fish, I just see fish balls without the soup. Like, brother!